Section 5.2, Calculating Percents. To calculate percent of a quantity, first write the percent as a decimal, then calculate the decimal value of the quantity. So if we were to take this one right here, 15% written as a decimal is going to be 0.15 because percent really means out of 100 anyway. So this is 15 hundredths. And if we're going to say 15% of 50, then of would be multiplication. So 0.15 times 50, and if you work that one out using a calculator, so we'll go 0.15 times 50, and your answer is going to be 7.5. So whenever you're given a percent, if it was 20%, it would be decimal 20. If it was 99%, it would be decimal 99 times 50. And of course, 100% would be 50 because 100% of anything is all of it. So let's go down to this one down here. 99% of 50 would be 0.99 times 50. So we want 99% of 50. So I'll go 0.99 times 50. And the answer is 49.5. So the answer is 49.5. In other words, just about all of 50. That's 99% of it. But what about percents that are greater than 100? You heard some people say, I'm going to give 110%. When really you think that percent would only go up to 100. Well, not really. If we look at this one here, I'm going to make a number line, and I'm going to say from here to here, this would be 850. Could be centimeters, could be whatever. Okay? So if I go in the middle of it, the middle of this 0 to 850 would be 50%. 100% would be right here. Now what if I want more than that? I want 40% more. Well, if I look from here to here, 40% of this is about right here. So it's about this much more. So I go down here and I add about this much more, not quite halfway again, and I will call that 140%. So that would be 140%. How do we calculate that now? Well, let's change our percent to a decimal. So I'll take 140, change it to a fraction. Percent, remember, means out of 100. Of course now, let's fix that because we know that's going to be one whole and then 40 out of 100. Now if you were to change that to the decimal, it would be one whole and 40 hundredths. So now I want 140% as a decimal is 1.40. Times it by 850, and my answer using the calculator, if I were to multiply that, will be 1,000. So if that was dollars, it'd be $1,190. Of course, if it was 240%, it would be 2.40. If it was 280%, it would be 2.80. So let's do the same thing for this one. We want 200% of 300. Well, if we were to measure from 0 to 300, 100% would be right here. So we're going to need double that amount. And of course, we know that if we double that amount, so this is 100% of it, if we need double that, we need 200%. You know what the answer is going to be, probably guessing already. But we're going to convert it into a decimal first. So 200% is 200 over 100, which will be 2 whole and 0 hundredths, or 2.0. Now multiply that by 300. So we've got our percent changed to a decimal times 300, and the answer here is 600. So it's not hard to change anything that's greater than 100% into a decimal. You're just going to end up with having something in front of the decimal as well. But what about something that's less than 1%? Okay, so we've got something here, 0, and let's say we've got all the way up to 1%. So there's 1%. Not a very good percent sign, but there you go. Now, what is roughly about 1/4 of that? Well, if we were to break it up into 4 parts, right there, there is 0.25% right there. So that is 1/4 of a percent. Okay. Now, let's go ahead and look at this relationship. Remember, 100% is going to be 1.0. 10% will be 0.10. 1% will be 0.01. And then, of course, if you went even lower, you could keep making it smaller and smaller. So we're going to take this and just change it right away, our percent into a decimal, or into a decimal without the percent there, because we don't like leaving our percents in our decimal, or our decimals in percents much. So let's change it. So we got 0.25%. Well, let's put 0.25 just like we did before. And remember, percent means out of 100. Now, the only thing we got to do is get rid of this decimal that's in the fraction by shifting the decimal 2 places to the right. In other words, timesing the top by 100, and then if you times the bottom by 100, you will take this decimal that's at the end and shift it 2 places, which means you'll have to put 2 zeros on the end. So now you'll have 25 over 10 thousandths. And that can be easily changed into a decimal, and I'll show you that when I show you the place value on the next example. All right, first, we got a 100 chart that represents 100%. Now, if we want to represent 125%, we're going to need one whole chart, because this is 100%. We're going to need to shade in everything. And we need 25% more. So I better shade in 25% or 25 of these blocks more. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm going to shade in basically 1/4 of this right here, like that. So that would give me 125%. Now, if I have 200%, like the next example, I would end up shading in all of this, because that'll give me 100. And all of this as well to give me another 100. So shade in everything, and that'll give me 200%. Pretty straightforward on how to represent percent using hundredths grids. Okay, so let's write each percent as a decimal. So let's take this first one. First, I'm going to write my percent as a fraction. So 230%, anything as a percent is out of 100. I'll do the same over here. Let's change this to 0.74, and percent, remember, is out of 100. All right, so now, all we have to do now is see how many times will 100 go into 230. And the answer is twice, because 100 and 100 is 200. And then I've got 30 over 100 left. And that's really easy to write as a decimal, because you need 2 places after the decimal for hundredths. And we've got 30 in there. This one over here is a little different. We don't like the decimal here in the fraction. So in order to get rid of it, we can shift it 2 places to the right up here, and then we would shift the decimal 2 places to the right here. Now shifting the decimal 2 places is the same thing as multiplying by 100 on the top and multiplying by 100 on the bottom. It's really the same thing. So if I shift it 2 places, I'm going to add a couple of zeros so I can jump them. 1, 2. Now I have 74 on top, and I have 1, 0, 0, 0, 0. So I get 74 10,000ths. The only thing left to do now is to remember my decimal places. So this is tenths, hundredths, thousandths, 10,000ths. So where do I put my 74 10,000ths? Right at the end of my 10,000ths place. And that is my answer once I put in my zeros in front. So that's how I will change it to a decimal if it's smaller than 100, or smaller than 1%, sorry.